Alright guys, welcome back. So up to this point we built out a lot of endpoints for our app. Actually we are coming close to concluding it. But I want us to start talking about API testing. So no, it's usually thought of as an afterthought, and most people don't usually do it, but in certain environments, for example when you're working on a team, it's always going to be easy for someone to break existing code because everyone will be working on different parts of the code and they would want to modify something somewhere else in the code, and that can easily like break the code without knowing. So when you add this to your code, it can prevent these errors from happening at an earlier stage. Still the same way, so they can act as the documentation for the code. So if you touch something, it will say, don't touch this. This code should do this. Or if it doesn't do that, then the test will fail, and everyone will be seeing that you're breaking something and they'll be yelling at you. So in this one, we are going to add some tests to make sure that the user can sign up to our application, to make sure they can log in, and also make sure that they can't log in if they have not verified their email. So it's gonna be awesome. We should start, but before we do that, I highly recommend you subscribe to the channel as we are going to continue learning a lot of good stuff like this. But now let's start. Alright, so I'm here in my text editor. So one thing you will notice that whenever you create an app, it will always come with this test.py file. This is where you can write your test cases. But for the most part, when you have an app like this that has many files, so we have utils, we have views, we have serializers, and you want to test all of these, using one file will not be efficient enough. So it's always good that you create another folder in the app and then you put all the tests for that app there. So right now, I'm going to delete this one. And then in the app, I'm going to create a new file, a new folder called tests. And then I'm going to have a file called data-init.py. Alright, so, and of course I should move this to the app, should be in the app. Alright, so right now you can see that we have created a new folder and it has a data-init file. And if you're not familiar with this data-init file, basically it makes Python look at this folder as a module such that we can import everything we put in here in other files. So in here, now we can write our tests in here, but I want to show you what happens when we have no test. So now if we go to our terminal and run Python manage.py test, what will happen is it's going to try to find the test and it finds nothing. And then you can see that it ran 0 tests and then okay. So let's add some tests. So right here, let's say we want to be able to test our views, test our serializers, our models, and every file that we want, and every file that we have created. So you're going to need to create separate folders for this, so if you want to manage it better. But for now, I'm going to create different files to test different things. So one is going to be testviews.py. Let's say we want to test the model. We can create another one like test_model.py. And then right now, when we're working with this, we are going to be having a lot of things that we need to do that are similar. For example, if you think of it, before we run a test, we might want to have like testing data to use for every test that we run. So it's always going to be important to create like a setup file that can do the things for us. So here, I'm going to create another file. I'm going to call it test setup.py. So in here, I'm going to create a class called test setup, and then in here we can now create our setup methods. But before we do that, when it comes to the Django REST framework, they give us a couple of utilities that we can use to test our applications, and one of them is, let me bring it in from REST framework .test import API. Actually, it should be API test case. Alright, so with this, we can now get access to all the GC stuff that we can use to test our endpoints and all that good stuff. So we have to inherit from it. And now in here, I want to set up a couple of things that we are going to be reusing. So one of them will be the declarations for our URLs, and then some testing data. So I'm going to import a utility called reverse Django URLs import reverse. Okay, so what reverse does, it takes in a view name and then it gives us a path to the route. So you can think of it as a URL that we can make a request to. If we want to get the URL for the registration endpoint, we can do something like self.register URL. So this is going to be equal to reverse, and then reverse takes in the view name. So if we take a look at our urls.py, which is here, you will notice that our register route is called register. So I'll bring that one in. So this should take care of doing that for us. So let me also get the login, so let me get the login. So this should be login, I believe. Let's cross check, and yes, it is. Okay, so once we have this, we basically need to have them in a method called setup. So I'm gonna cut them out, and then I'm gonna create a method called setup. I'm gonna bring in another one called teardown. These two methods here, they are called for every test that runs. So in here, yeah, so now we can define all our variables that we want to be accessible in every test method that we run. So whenever a test runs, it's going to be running this. So it's going to run this, and then when it's done, it runs this. And then it goes to another test, it runs this, then it runs the tests, of course, and then runs this. All right, so those are the two that we have set out. But then when we are going to like create a user, we are going to need like user data to test with. So I'm going to create a variable called user data. So this is going to be equal to a dictionary, since as you may know, we need to send like the email. So I can have like email@gmail.com. And then we are going to need the username and then the password. All right, so I'm gonna use the email as my username because we have validations even catch that we shouldn't have usernames that are not alphanumeric. So this is what we're gonna set up. So I'm gonna go to the views, and then I'm gonna create a class to test our views. So class, I'm gonna call it test views. This is going to inherit from the class that we've already made, which is here in test setup, and it's called test setup. Oh, what a generic name. So I'm going to import it here. So from the test setup, import the class. So we inherit from it just so we can get access to everything that is defined here. So once we get those, now I'm going to create a function to test that a user can register. So let's say test user can register. All right, so since this is the class, takes himself, and then in here, now we can start writing our assertions. So what assertions are, basically, you can think of them as a comparison, like checks. Okay, so here, let's say we want to make a request and see if we can get response from our API. So here, when we import from API test case, we get access to something called an API client, which is this one. So once we inherit from here, we get access from it. And now that we are inheriting from that class, it means that we already have it here. So here we can do self.client.post, because we are sending a post request to the registration, and then here we need to send a path. So we can say self.register URL. All right, so this, as you may think of it, will probably not work because we are not sending the data. We are not sending the user data. But what I want us to do is actually check that the user can't sign up by just clicking a button without submitting anything. So I'm going to change the test method name here. So I'm going to call it not register with no data. When we make a request, it gives us a response. So we can save the response. And now we can run assertions on this response. So what do we expect in this case? We basically expect that we are going to get an error, maybe a 4 or something. So we can write res.status code. So we expect this one to equal to 400, I believe. So I'm going to now run an assertion to basically check for this. So when we are inheriting from these classes, we can already run assert equal, and then we give it two things. So one of what we are going to be checking and what we would think it would equate to. So we actually expect that res.status code will be 400. So I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to go to my terminal and then rerun these tests. So when I run the tests, you can see that now we have one run, and then we can see a check, meaning that it passed. So let's say we expected like 200 here. We'd expect this to fail. So let's see. You can see that it fails, and we basically are getting an error instead. So I want to show you guys how you can inspect this. So I'm gonna add a PDB here, which, if you don't know, is like a Python debugger. It enables you to pause the program execution and look at the variables. So let's take a look at these values. So if we run the test again, we can see that it pauses, and then if we look at res, so you see it's a 400 response. So meaning that basically that's what we want. But if you want to see like which data is being sent down, you can run res.data, and now you can see everything here. So you can run all your assertions on these. You see all the data that we have, so you can also run assertions on these. But I'm gonna keep it simple here, and then let's move on and I'll show you more stuff. So I'm gonna actually cut this one out. So if we want to test that a user can sign up correctly, I'm gonna duplicate this one. So let's say a user can sign up, user can register correctly. And guys, feel free to add more assertions here. So you can actually add more. You can check the data, check the response codes, and all that stuff. So here we want to check if the user can sign up successfully. So first thing, we pass the URL, and now we need to pass the data. So here we can pass self.data. How did we call it? Let's take a look at the setup. Okay, so we need to add self here just so we can access it when we inherit from this class. So it's called user data. All right, so the second parameter, we can pass the data. So self.user_data. So save that. And now that we are sending JSON, we can define the format. So we can say format equals JSON. All right, so what we would expect now, actually, let me change this to 400 again. Now we would expect to have a 201 created because we know everything is valid. Here we can have something like res equals this, and then we can assert for a 201. All right, so if we run this, if we run the tests again, you can see that they all pass, meaning that the user was created. In fact, if we look at the res, if we do a PDB and then run again and do res.data, you see we get our user created and being sent back. So we can actually check this. So for example, right here, we can add another assertion, like I was saying. We can do something like self.assert equal. So let's assert that res.email, actually it should be res.email will be equal to the email that we have. So the email that we sent, we can also get the email that we sent, we can get it from user data, and then it's email. So I want to verify that the server can send us back the email once we create an account. And yeah, we can do the same thing for the username. So we can do the same thing for the username. And you can run any Python comparison here. So if we run this one again, if we run it, so you can see that this now is failing. So if we do, let's see. So this should be res.data. Okay, res.data. Okay, so what we're saying is in the data response that we get, the key email should be equal to the email that we sent to the server. So if we run this, you can see that they all pass. All right, so let's test for a user to authenticate correctly. Okay, so first thing, let's first write a test to make sure that the user who is not verified cannot log in. So test, so dev test. And guys, the way I'm writing these test methods, you can see I prefix everything with test underscore. And this is very important. You also need to do it like this, as this is what Django uses to find these tests. So this should be test user cannot login with an unverified email. Okay, text itself, which is a long name of a function. Guys, you guys can make it smaller. All right, so right here, you notice that when we create a user here, we basically get a user, but that user, if you come to think of it, that user is not verified. So we don't expect them to be able to log in. So I'm going to bring this one here. So here we are making a request to the registration. So we are registering and we are sure we are doing that because we've tested it up there. And once we do that, now we can make another request to login. So to make a request to login, we use the client, of course, and then we post. So we want to post to login. So this should be self.login URL. And then the next one will be the data that we want to send. So here we can actually send the same data because it's the same payload, and the endpoint will use the password and the email from there. So we can keep this. So let's save the response from this in a variable res. So now we would expect this to be a 401. So if you think of it, we would think the endpoint we should send us a 401. So here we can assert, so self with assert equal. So we want res.status code, and this should be a 401. So depending on how the API is structured, it can be different depending on how you intend to implement it. So if we run this, you can see that it passes. And you might be asking, what is happening here? Because we've created a user, yes, but they are unable to log in. So the reason for that is because the account is not verified. Actually, if we take a look here, if we take a look at the res, so let me add a PDB, and then we run this test. Oh, not a server. We want to run the test. So if we look at res.data, you can start to get email is not verified. All right, so how do we go ahead and log in and test for this case? So what we can do is we can actually manually verify this user through code and then test if they can log in after verification. So you can actually keep this and then create another test case. And then here we can test user can log in, test user can log in after verification. All right, so right here, what we're gonna do, when we make a request to sign up a user, we are going to save that in res. Can call it even a response. So when we make a request to sign up a user and it gives us a response, it means that we are going to be getting the new data that will be sent back. So now you can have the user's email here, and this is going to be equal to response.data, then email. And once we get that, now we can manually activate this user using the user model. So the way we do that, let's bring in the user model. And here you can really import anything you want from Python. So actually you can import it from models, import user. All right. So let's verify the user. So here we can do user equals user objects get. So I want to get by email. So add email. This should be equal to now the email that we have. And now let's verify them here. So we can do user is verified equals true. And then let's save. So user, let's save. So now we will go ahead and verify the user manually. So when we make a request to the endpoint again, we are going to expect this user to be able to log in. So we are going to expect a 200. All right, so let's test that. If we come over here and we run the test, you can see that they all pass. Good. So yeah, that's gonna do it for this one. But maybe one last thing I can show you is that you noticed how we, here in the setup, we quite like hard-coded the testing data. So I would recommend you guys look into something called fixtures. But I want to show you something. If you want to get like the dynamic data here, and you really don't want to add code stuff here, you can use a package called Faker. So here I'm going to bring it in. So pip install Faker. Okay, so I already have it. So once you get that the Faker module installed, you can actually use it to generate fake data for testing. Okay, so the way we use it is we import it and then we set an instance for it, and then we can start using it to get the data. So here I'm going to bring it in. So you can see we import it, and then right here we can initialize it or instantiate the Faker class, and then now we can use this Faker. So here I'm going to actually save self.fake, because this, you can call it anything here actually. So now if we want the email, we can do something like self.fake.email, and if we want the username, I'm actually going to get the username from my email. So when I run .fake.email, now I can split this, and we know that all emails will have an at domain. So we have an at, and then I will keep the first user at that domain. So for the password, it can literally be anything. So you can even use this, doesn't matter. But what I want to show you is, anyway, it doesn't really matter for the passwords. So let's skip that. I'm actually going to use an email as a password, an email format as a password. And then I'm going to add a PDB here just so we can see how it looks like. Now if I come back to the app and run the tests, you can see that it pauses. So if we take a look, if we take a look at user data, so we do like user data, self.user data, you can see that we have basically the data, testing data using Faker. So you guys feel free to check that one out. If I continue, so I need to actually remove the PDB because it's going to be rerunning this. So if we rerun it again, you can see that all our tests pass, and now we are using dynamic data from Faker. So that's going to do it for the video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.